Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human and sludge enthusiast, Arif Hassan. Arif, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I'm a little bit. I'm hitting a crash after we recorded our Patreon special episode. But other than that, pretty good.
It's a bit much, is what we discovered. It's
only 18 minutes. That's weird to me. That or the thing that we watched is only 18 minutes. But man, is it a action-packed 18 minutes?
It really is just an emotional roller coaster. The Halloween special for Just a Dash with Maddie Matheson season 2 came out yesterday, and initially I texted Arif and went, so I found 2020 in video form, and then I went, no, actually don't watch this. We're watching this tomorrow for Patreon. Don't touch it. We need the reaction to Sludge there. So if you're interested in such craziness, head over to Patreon, because that watch along will be live when this episode comes out. So, but there was a football game on tonight, at least, that was semi-interesting, so we'll get to that here in just a second. Before we start, just want to thank everyone for listening to Norse Code. Want to just quick mention how much we appreciate it. If you enjoy the show and would like to encourage us to continue, let's do that. You can help us financially in one or two different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate to the show there. That is more of a subscription-based model. It also gives you access to the bonus episodes, like the 2 that we're putting out this week. So if you're interested in such things, you can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well. That's more of a one-time donation experience. But if you would like to do either, it is always appreciated. It helps with costs. It helps with us sending out stuff in December, which we are still planning to do. If you are somebody who is subscribed to Patreon, I will be sending out swag to you if you just send me a quick message and say, yes, I would in fact appreciate some swag from Norse Code. So the only qualifier is you have to be subscribed before December 1st. So just a quick mention there. Again, just email me at norsecodepodcast@gmail.com or DM me at the Norse Code DN account. So that was quite the football game tonight with the Falcons and the Panthers. Everyone obviously was expecting the Falcons to fold there, but man, that game really did feel like it changed drastically after Teddy Bridgewater's injury.
Yeah, that was wild. Charles Harris hits him in the hits him in the head, but it moves his neck. It ends up being a neck injury. It looked really brutal. And it was Dante Fowler who tripped him in the first place. Just an absolute. The game just changed, right? Like on a dime when that happened. I mean, PJ Walker came in, which obviously I'm a fan of because he's an XFL superstar, but
not ready for the situation that he was put into, I think is the nicest thing that we could say about PJ Walker and his performance in the game.
Yeah, I think so. So, the game changed pretty dramatically, and Teddy was a lot less aggressive, I think. And then when it came time for him to be aggressive, he just wasn't accurate enough. So, that kind of sucked. I think we were all, pulling for him because of what happened with the injury, and then also obviously the Vikings connection too. But brutal. But hey, the Falcons didn't give up a lead, so they've got that going for them.
And Todd Gurley didn't end up ruining the team's game or the game plan by crossing over an imaginary line again. So,
well, actually, yes, he did. It just didn't matter.
It just because he ran out of bounds. Much.
Yeah, because he ran out of bounds and stopped the clock, which saved the Panthers about 50 seconds, maybe, or a timeout, probably more likely.
Yeah. Well, the Falcons 2-minute drive or their 2-minute offense was not great. It really just involved a 42-yard amazing catch, and then after that, they just didn't really have anything. But
Yeah, inaccurate throws or drops. Like when they were accurate, they were dropped. When they weren't accurate, they were picked. So
if you're in a 2-minute offense, you can't be in a situation where you have to burn one of your timeouts because of a fault, because you're
the
not
delay of
watching the
game.
play clock. Yeah, it's
Yeah, which is I was actually kind of worried about that for most of the game because Bridgewater was bringing the clock all the way down, kind of like Rogers does, all the way down to the 1 second and the zero before he snapped, and that was pretty dangerous. And he ended up playing with fire twice. I think he had to call a timeout in the first half because of it, and then obviously they burned a timeout slash almost got a delay a game right before the 2 minute, which that I mean, it might have been useful. It didn't end up mattering because of the pick, but yeah, that's just a mistake that he can't make. And obviously, he's been one of the things that he's known for is being particularly good at that kind of stuff with situational awareness. So yeah, man, that sucks.
yeah, it's definitely is too bad. I was pulling for Bridgewater. I was pulling for a win, and as it turns out, Julio Jones did the exact same thing to the Panthers that he did to the Vikings, where it's like, I can only catch the ball if I'm going to get 20 yards off of this.
Yeah, yeah, but he got a ton of big catches.
It's like
Um,
140 plus yards.
yeah, yeah, I think it was almost 100. Right? It was like 137 or something like that. Um, 3 shots at a touchdown. Didn't get any of them. I don't think. Very Julio.
But as a Julio Jones owner in fantasy, it just I am enjoying this whole he can't throw to anybody but Julio for more than if he does, it's only for like it's 20 plus yards every time. I'm totally on board with this philosophy. I think it's great. I think he should definitely continue with whatever this is, especially now that the number 2 receiver is apparently going to be hurt. So
Yeah.
no, this is totally fine. And their kicker managed to miss an extra point, which helps me this fantasy week as well. So
I can't believe someone rostered him. That's ridiculous.
why would you roster him? He's missed at least 3 now, like to the point where Joe Buck actually has to mention it on the broadcast that he's missed, like 3 or 4 this year. Like at that point, he's on waivers in at least one of the leagues.
Yeah.
Just there's no reason to think of rostering the kicker for the Falcons. He will break your heart. So let's get into this episode of Norse Code. There is a Vikings game this weekend that we're going to preview, and we have a mailbag as well. But before we get to the mailbag, let's go over to the preview that Arif taped earlier today with Zach Rapport of the Acme Packing Company SB Nation site.
All right, I'm here with Zach Rapport from Acme Packing Company to talk about everyone's favorite team, the Green Bay Packers. We'll break down a lot of them. Yeah, I don't see anybody having any problems with this matchup. But yeah, we'll break down some of the individual matchups one by one. But first, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. It feels like only 20 minutes ago we were doing this on my show, man. So
yeah, right. Yeah.
A little tip for that.
Yeah, just a little a pod pro quo. Is that what you want to call it?
Oh, I like that. Oh man, it's almost like you're a writer or something.
Yeah. So the Packers are they're in contention for a number 1 seed, right? Like I don't think they'll get it, but they're definitely in the running for a number 1 seed.
You don't think they'll get it? Come on. Yeah, no, I think that's a fair assessment.
All right, cool. Yeah, so they're good. The Vikings are not. Let's talk about it. First, let's talk about Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers has not been producing statistically since 2015 at the level that we're fairly used to seeing. Everyone obviously remembers the 2010, 2011 seasons, but a bunch of executives have insisted, some scouts have insisted that he remains an elite quarterback, and certainly over the past couple of years, he's put together a really remarkable highlight reel. But his play-to-play consistency didn't seem to be there in his end level. Production and efficiency statistics were closer to league average than they were elite, right? So a down year for Rodgers is still pretty good. And that's what it seemed like he was going through since 2015. But now he's producing at a remarkable level, despite the fact that they didn't bring anybody in besides a third string running back. So why is he good now?
Well, in terms of his down years being above average or good years for many quarterbacks. He said as much.
He said that, yeah.
Because ever the modest, not prickly
Right.
at all press conference giver that he is, he's gonna speak his mind. No, as a Packers fan, one of the most frustrating things about watching Aaron Rodgers not be as good as that he can be over the last couple years has been sort of the issues with his mechanics and with his fundamentals, where even to the layperson you can see it's an off-platform throw. He's not setting his feet. He's trying to do too much, and just getting over the past few years, getting away from some of the things that are, and that's the reason they're called fundamentals. They are the fundamental body mechanics of good quarterback play, and just relying too much on his smarts and on his arm, which is still elite, is awesome, but it can only take you so far. And he's throwing things in the dirt, and he's, as you mentioned, struggling over the last few years. So I think that there's been he had sort of a reckoning over the offseason, watching some old film. He talked about going back to as far back as 2010, the Super Bowl year, and seeing things that he was doing differently. And I think that he's really being honest about that, and that he has made some improvements mechanically. We still see some of those hiccups, but for the most part, I think Packers fans will agree that he's cleaned a lot of that up, and we see the results. The other half of that is that we no longer have sort of the stale Mike McCarthy offense. And I think at this point we can pretty much say, having seen how Dallas is starting, that McCarthy was a man past his prime. And I love McCarthy, and on our show we love McCarthy, and we will stand by him most of the time, mostly because we like to do impressions of him, quite honestly. But LaFleur comes in. It's a whole new modern NFL offensive scheme. It's what Packers fans have been clamoring for a number of years, watching teams like the Rams a few years ago and the 49ers and just all this fun stuff. And now we get our version of that. And suddenly, almost like magic, except it's not magic because it is scheme related, all of a sudden wide receivers are open, and Aaron Rodgers playing with better mechanics, throwing to receivers who are winning matchups and more open than they used to be, whether it be because of motion or other scheme reasons. I think that is what brings us to your question here. Why is Aaron Rodgers playing much better? I think all of that combined will get us close to the answer.
Sure, that's a long answer, and we appreciate it. No, don't worry about it. This is exactly what this podcast is about. So that's the case. It also seems to be that that receiving core is essentially one person, especially with Alan Lazard. Yeah, well, I got it. Don't worry.
Yeah, we all call him Alien Lizard, so
I caught myself at the end. Especially with Alan Lazard not available for the past couple of weeks, right? And he's not going to be available for this matchup. So it's mostly Devonta Adams, right?
Yep.
We've seen big plays from Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Malik Taylor has made a couple of plays. I saw Darius Shepard catch a pass once. I guess Equanimeous St. Brown hasn't really done a ton. But it's those five receivers, but it's primarily Devonta Adams, and the other receiving threat is Robert Tonyan, thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
And so that seems to be kind of where the passing game is going through. Like what else should people be aware of from a skill position perspective when it comes to receivers?
Jamal Adams, Jamal Williams, who is not a receiver, obviously, but right. is great catching passes out of the backfield, and they use him a lot. And I believe that Aaron Jones is going to be back in this game running the ball, taking sort of the first running back reps, if you will. So Williams will be used more as a blocker and then out catching passes. Really valuable player. But beyond that, I mean, not much. I gave a really long answer before, and I'll give a short one here. I think you summed it up nicely. The Packers don't have a ton of options. MVS is a guy who he's, like Geronimo Allison the past few years. It's a guy that we just like clamoring for them to take the next step. And just seems to be blowing it at every opportunity. A guy who is so fast and can get open and then just can't make the catch frustrating to watch. EQ comes back from an injury, and he, I don't know, shaking the rust off or what have you. There's not a lot of options there. Malik Taylor is a guy that, you know, we might be excited about at some point. It's good to see him get some action. Tunyon, I think, is probably the next biggest threat. And that's it, man. That's it. It's tumbleweed.
So does it feel bizarre that you've got an effective passing game with only one, I guess two, if you include Tunyon, receivers that can be threats for big plays? Like, I know you mentioned Jamal Williams is a good receiver, but I mean, he's not like a big play threat.
No, I mean, a big play for him is once a game he'll have like a 30-yard reception, which is nice.
Yeah.
Not usually a touchdown, but does it feel weird? That's a fun question. Does it feel weird? Yeah, I'd say it does. It does feel weird. But I also think, you know, it's kind of the joy of, you know, for the first time here over the last 2 years, for the first time in the 13 years prior, getting to watch a new offense kind of come into fruition. And that new offense is about motion, and as LaFleur would say, the illusion of complexity and lots of moving parts. And that's been fun to watch, and it's productive. And it's productive despite the fact that, you know, it's like a bunch of soon-to-be UPS drivers out there catching passes. But yes, it does feel weird.
All right. So you take a look at the matchup for these receivers, and you see, hey, all the Vikings cornerbacks are hurt, or on the COVID reserve list, I guess. So their third cornerback, I guess, is healthy, Jeff Gladney. Maybe fourth. It kind of depends on how you rank him. Doesn't really matter at that point. And then they'll be going with like a fifth and a sixth cornerback, one of them coming off of a practice squad. How would you, the new Vikings defensive coordinator, deal with this issue, right? Because the issue is primarily Devonta Adams and Aaron Rodgers, but you can't leave these other guys uncovered. So how do you deal with this? You've got two elite safeties. You've got a bunch of guys off the street playing cornerback. I mean, admittedly, one of them is a first-round pick, but a bunch of guys off the street playing cornerback. And at some point, someone's going to have to take on Robert Tunyon. And, you know, who knows? Maybe Mercedes Lewis chooses this game to catch a pass. I don't know.
Oh, big dog. Got to give him some love. How would you do that? You know, I think I don't want to say you can't do it, because I'll soon be eat those words probably, but you can't do what Houston did against Adams, which is just rely on man-to-man and one-on-one, because Adams is going to win that 9 times out of 10. So you got to have some form of double coverage or help, whether it's a safety over. You gotta help your guy out. You got to put two hats on Adams, and if you can do that and also find a way to get some amount of pressure around Aaron Rodgers, collapse the pocket a little bit, I think that's where you're going to find the most success. But as you mentioned, you know, there are those guys then squeezing out into the flat, Tunyon and maybe even Mercedes Lewis and some of these other guys available. So it is sort of a balancing act of kind of pick your poison there. But I think that, you know, Adams is the obvious choice, because we see what happens when you just trust one guy to cover Adams. It usually doesn't go well.
All right. So I guess Anthony Harris will just be kind of hovering over wherever Devonta Adams is.
Yeah, just hang out over there. Just bring a stool with you.
So I think one of the hidden strengths, I wouldn't say hidden necessarily because people have a lot of praise for it, but we don't talk a lot about it when it comes to matchups. Let's talk about it here. The offensive line. So I think ESPN ranks at number 2 in pass block win rate, number 1 in run block win rate. Seems like a pretty good offensive line. I don't believe with Lucas Patrick actually had a pretty good game the other week. But yeah, it's the only kind of issue is Elton Jenkins will occasionally have a bad game, but he has mostly been playing extremely well. And then Billy Turner, you know, you got to have a guy.
Billy Turner he's a highly paid guy.
Yeah, so that seems to be it. David Bakhtiari, I believe, is coming back. Correct me if I'm wrong. And so, I mean, this is a pretty good offensive line. How do you attack it when you've got 4 backups rushing the passer?
Wow, man. That's a really good question. I actually have not confirmed if Bakhtiari is coming
Okay,
back.
so what does it look like if Bakhtiari is not back, and then what does it look like if he is?
Well, if he's not back, then I think that they stumbled upon a successful formula last week with Billy Turner, who, like you mentioned, is a guy, and they signed him to kind of play on the right side of the line, mostly guard, a little bit of tackle, and then it turns out in a pinch here that he's actually like a serviceable backup left tackle. I thought he played pretty well in Houston. They didn't. He's typically as a guard a better run blocker than a pass blocker, but he played great in pass pro at left tackle. They didn't. The Packers didn't test him too much as far as run blocking goes. A team that typically likes to work the outside zone, as I mentioned, that modern LaFleur scheme and kind of spreading things out laterally. They didn't test him there. I'm glad they didn't. They kept sort of a power running game. They might try to do that against the Vikings, but I'm rambling and I already forgot the question. How do you
how do you rush the passer? So A, Aaron Rodgers is getting rid of the ball really quickly, got rid of the ball insanely quickly last week. B, you've got potentially the top offensive line. Let's assume that David Bakhtiari, who's been in limited participation in the last 2 days in practice, let's assume he comes back and plays at the level that you expect him to play if he's only like slightly hurt, which most football players are.
Yeah.
How would you, the new defensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings, attack this offensive line, knowing that you've just traded Unique Ngakoue, that Daniil Hunter is out for the season with that surgery, and that you've got two tackles that most recently were backups last year?
Yeah. I'm going to be a little bit counterintuitive and say up the middle, I think, is where you got to try to get in, push the line back and generate pressure, because, Aaron Rodgers, even given his advanced age at this point, if he's allowed to squeeze out and get on the outside, he's still dangerous and for opposing teams frustrating, being able to pick up first downs with his legs and as well. The Packers right now, when Aaron Rodgers has been at his best, is when they're getting into that rhythm, quick passing game. And I think that the quickest way to try to neutralize that is to actually get pressure up the middle. Now, whether or not you guys are capable of that, I would leave that to your your judgment.
I mentioned on your show that Aaron Rodgers is one of the few elite quarterbacks that statistically is a little bit worse against the blitz than he is in a standard drop back. How do you feel about hearing that? Does that match your intuitions? Do you think that that's a viable defensive strategy against him?
I do think it's a viable defensive strategy against him. How does, I like these questions that are like, how does it make you feel to hear? What are your feelings?
Let it all out, man. We're here for you. It's a safe space.
I appreciate that. I'm gonna crack a beer here now. Yeah, I think that does ring true, and it's I don't want to say a new phenomenon. It's definitely something I think that has that has borne out in the last couple years. And you mentioned sort of like the few years where Rodgers was struggling, and I really think that it was, they, at the tail end of the Mike McCarthy offense, defenses figured out how to neutralize Aaron Rodgers in that scheme. And I think that he still a little bit sometimes sees ghosts from those days as well. He's older, he's suffered some devastating injuries. And I think that just affects the way that you play. He's not quite as fearless as he used to be. How does that make me feel as a Packers fan?
Let it all out, man.
I don't know. I feel like I'm a very reasonable, realistic Packers fan. So that feels, I don't know, it feels normal to me. The guy is, he's 1 year older than me. I don't want to, I'm trying to cross the street, man. Give me a break.
You see Eric Kendricks bearing down on you. Oh man, I got to get this to Adams now. All right. Well, let's unless there's something else on the offense you want to talk about, which feel free. Let's switch to the defense. You all right with that?
Let's do it.
Cool. Well, let's talk about everyone's favorite player, Kamal Martin, Golden Gopher, now Trader.
Everyone's favorite player. Oh, I guess on the Minnesota side, sure.
Come on, man. We got to start. So this was his first start last week?
So he did not start. He's
coming back from injury. He was injured in training camp, right?
He was on injured reserve, and this was the first game that he was available.
Okay.
Chris Barnes, who is an undrafted.
He's been playing well.
He's been playing well. He's a pleasant surprise. He's definitely a guy, I think, that they stumbled into. He gets nicked up, and then Ty Summers replaces him. And I think that the only reason that Ty Summers went in ahead of Kamal Martin is just because he's had the reps and they trusted him to, I know what he's supposed to do, but he came in and he got shredded instantly on the first drive. I joked about it in our post-game recap, but Ty Summers comes into that game against the Texans, and that's the moment when I decided as a fan, I'm going to spend this drive watching Ty Summers and pay attention to him. And then I feel like Deshaun Watson also said the same thing because he just got exposed. And after that drive, Kamal Martin came in, and it was apparent that is an upgrade at that position. So hopefully going forward, and you and I on our airwaves, we're just joking a little bit about inside linebackers. Hopefully the Packers have kind of fallen ass backwards into some capable inside linebackers in
the 5th round pick and an undrafted free agent contract.
Yeah, and don't forget Christian Kirksey is a guy who's coming back soon as well. Is he a world beater? No, but is he better than like the D minus that we've?
Wow, I can't believe you'd say this about Vanderbilt's best.
Inside, it's just such a thorn in our side as Packers fans. This organization is allergic to putting resources at the inside linebacker position, and I get the strategy behind it, but it is frustrating to watch. It is frustrating year after year to watch teams run all over you and watch shifty quarterbacks pick up 3rd and long with their legs, and it's just every time. And so anyway, that's again in my feeling.
If they put A.J. Dillon at linebacker, do you feel better about that?
If they put who?
A.J. Dillon.
He's got the legs for it, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, 2nd round pick. He has to drive through tackles. You can't deny that. Yeah. That's an investment at the linebacker position, then.
But no, to get to your earlier question, Kamal Martin is a guy that we haven't seen a ton of, but the little bit of action we saw this past Sunday was a breath of fresh air. And personally, I'm really looking forward to seeing him. I think he instantly catapulted into the starting inside linebacker conversation.
All right, well, let's talk about a couple of other Big Ten players. We got Rashawn Gary, Tyler Lancaster, Dean Lowry, and then I believe a Pac-12 player in Kenny Clark, unfortunately. But Kenny Clark was injured and he's coming back, right?
Yeah, he came back last week, and so he will be ready to go. Is he 100%? It didn't quite seem like it, but Kenny Clark
going up against like Ezra Cleveland. It doesn't matter, dude.
Right. And Kenny Clark going up against anyone at 90% is better than, Tyler Lancaster at 100%.
Wow. Okay. I guess we'll be talking about, is it Texas A&M's Kingsley Keke instead? Is that? Yeah, Texas A&M. All right. Okay. So Kingsley Keke has been all right. Dean Lowry has been all right. Rashawn Gary is good now.
I think that is that sentence exactly with the extra question mark at the end is something that's been said a lot amongst Packer fans this year. Rashawn Gary is good now, but our buddy Justice Mosqueda, when he was drafted by the Packers, immediately Justice came out and said, "This is a bad pick. I think it's a bust. I don't like this guy." But he has since this year amended that stance and said, "I will allow for, players at this position do get better after a year or two. It does happen." And it looks like it might be happening with him. And I do think that's the case. Now he's had an ankle injury off and on, so that's been affecting his ability to get around people. We expect him to be a little bit more healthy this week, but yeah, I would say he is good now. Is he great now? Do Packers fans feel great about the first round value on that? Maybe not. Maybe it'll take another season or two for them to forget about that. But yeah, I think he's a good player.
Rashawn Gary or Marcus Davenport?
This is another "how do I feel" question. Rashawn Gary.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Like,
Cool.
I don't know. I don't know. You have me on your like. I'm the narrative guy. I'm not the DVOA guy. I'm the narrative guy. Rashawn Gary seems nice. I like him.
Yeah, he seems nice. Lost a lot of weight. You got to reward that kind of work. All right. Let's talk about some other edge rushers. So you got the Smith brothers. Preston Smith started off kind of slow. Seems to be kind of back to his previous form. Za'Darius Smith, I don't know. I guess you could say that he's not playing up to his like last year's level, but he also like led the league in pressures last year. So whatever. But he's playing pretty well. How are those? How do you feel about these outside linebackers? Tell us your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions.
Again, and I love this therapy session we're doing here.
Yeah.
I feel like they are getting a bad rap this year. One of the things that's different is, so last year they were used as a tandem. Talking about the Smiths together to generate pressure on a lot of plays, and it worked great. And for whatever reason this year, Mike Pettin has decided that he's going to take Za'Darius Smith and move him around a lot more. So you'll see him in these earlier games. You'll see him playing inside, moving in lining up all over the place in ways that he didn't last year, and it hasn't been as effective. And I think that they got back to sort of last year's formula last week against the Texans. Now, maybe that's a matchup thing, and that's not something that we'll see every week going forward. But I do think that it was instantly noticeable, as you noticed with Preston Smith. He's been kind of a whipping boy all year for Packers fans. Where the famous disappearing act of Preston Smith. But suddenly, we get back to business the way things were last year against the Texans this past week, and he's generating pressure all over the place. So yeah, I don't know.
In fairness, Preston Smith was up against Titus Howard, right? Like,
yeah.
That's probably playing a role here.
It's fair. I don't know. And again, as the super reasonable, cautious, realistic person, whenever someone who I know is a very good player is struggling, I assume it's not because they're suddenly not good at football, and more like maybe he's got a slight core muscle injury that is unreported and no one's talking about. Like stuff like that happens all the time.
Well, yeah, Gardner Minshew apparently just has been playing with a thumb injury since October 11th, and everyone just found out.
Those aren't important for quarterbacks.
yeah, it was his throwing hand. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess the Jaguars found out about an hour before the rest of us.
Oh boy.
So yeah, I mean, these things can happen. So when you take a look at Dean Lowry, Kenny Clark, Kingsley Keke, or Tyler Lancaster, Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, Za'Darius Smith, you take a look at the stable of potential pass rushers and run stuffers. And then you take a look at this Vikings offensive line. You see Riley Reiff having a career year. You see Brian O'Neill, playing well, and Garrett Bradbury having improved somewhat substantially since last year. And, some like wet cardboard figurines at guard. How do you approach this as the Packers defensive coordinator?
I mean, just bring the house. I mean, Packers fans have been clamoring for more pass rush all season long, and it wasn't until last week again against the Texans that there were a few third down instances where Pettin actually brought the house and generated real pressure. It's been a point of frustration all year, and I just think Pettin should be licking his chops, honestly, at this offensive line. The way you described them, and it's particularly visceral description, because just not 2 hours ago I was in my backyard literally ripping up wet cardboard that had been caught in a storm. So very familiar with how easy it is to shred through there, and I feel like Pettin should just bring the house, man.
All right. So that's an area of weakness for the Vikings. Obviously, that offensive line. An area of strength obviously involves the Vikings skill position group. So you got Dalvin Cook, who I think it's fair, whenever there's divisional arguments between who's the best running back in the division, Taron Jones or Dalvin Cook. And I think it's easy to make the argument for either. You've got Justin Jefferson, who's got more yards through 6 games than any rookie receiver in history, not named Anquan Bolden, which is like just a curious, if you're not familiar with the way he started out, just a curious name to be at the top of that list.
Yeah.
But, he's ahead of, Odell Beckham and Randy Moss and Andre Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins and all those great rookies. So you've got that, and then you've got Adam Thielen on the other side, who has historically done extremely well against the Packers, and then, of course, just generally is a very good receiver. But you've got Jair Alexander. You've got Darnell Savage. Kevin King, I think, is better this year, I guess.
Although
If
I don't
he's
believe
healthy,
playing this week.
yeah, actually, I was just about that because I saw him in the injury report. He was DNP. I don't think he played last week. What's going on there?
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the injury report, and I have missed it, but also
DNP for both Thursday and Wednesday. So,
and was
good
Savage
chance
on
he's
the
not
list
playing.
because he also missed last week.
Who?
Darnell Savage.
Oh, limited participation, both with quadricep injuries. I should look into that.
It's the COVID times, no training camp. Everyone's pulling a hammy, man. That's soft tissue injuries.
Yeah, I just traded for KJ Hamler in my dynasty league. I'm very familiar with soft tissue hamstring injuries.
Fantasy talk, fantasy corner. Do the listeners jump ship when you start talking about fantasy?
I don't try to talk very much about my teams. So we've got our own Norse Code fantasy league that I don't know if you follow on Twitter, but it's got the you lose 25 points for a missed extra point, and you're required to roster an active kicker. So there's fun stories as a result of that, but we don't tend to talk too much about it.
I've sidestepped and now I've forgotten the question, but I assume we're talking.
So what's going to happen in the secondary, right? Kevin King didn't play last week, may not play this week. Darnell Savage didn't play last week. Limited participant this week. That sounds to me like there's a pretty decent chance he plays.
Yeah.
Raven Green, I think. So is he a safety or a corner? What's going on there?
He's about that. He's a safety. He's listed as a safety. That's how he's mostly used, and in a Pettin offense with no inside linebackers, the safety is often also coming up to bring pressure and to make tackles in the run game, which Raven Green is really, really good at. He's less good in the passing game. So in terms of exploiting the secondary, I think that's an area you can look at. He played pretty well against the Texans, especially against the run and making tackles, but he's definitely weak against the pass. I would start there, followed by, I guess, Chandon Sullivan would be sort of the next best player. He's an aggressive corner who I really like, but is also young, can be taken advantage of.
Okay, and Jair Alexander. So Pettin doesn't tend to follow, right? He doesn't have corners shadow all that much, right?
Yeah, no.
So Alexander, so the Vikings basically get to pick. I mean, not always. I mean, Pettin will mix things up, but the Vikings get to pick, who they put up against Jair Alexander. So now you're the Vikings offensive coordinator. You've got Adam Thielen. You've got Justin Jefferson. I guess Chad Beebe in 3 receivers. I don't know. It's a different third receiver every week.
We let any BB. We're big fans.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I chose Chad Beebe because I figured not as fast as the Beebe you're familiar with,
no.
but or as good at catching or as tall.
Yeah.
But
I got you.
Yeah. But no, I mean, he led the FBS in drops when he in his final year in college. When I say not as good at catching, I mean it pretty seriously. But it's either Chad Beebe or BC Johnson or I don't know, Tajay Sharp. So you've got a third receiver. So do you decide to go, best on best, put Adam Thielen on Jair Alexander? Do you decide, hey, actually this rookie's really explosive, let's see what happens, put him on Alexander? Or do you decide, hey, if we're going to have somebody erased by Alexander potentially, because he hasn't seen a ton of targets over the past couple of weeks.
Yep.
On your podcast, we just talked about how great he is without generating a ton of statistics. And they called it the Nnamdi Asomugha problem back when Nnamdi was good in Oakland.
Yep.
What do you do? Do you put BC Johnson on him and just say, you know what, that's, we'll force Pettin to move him around if he wants to have an impact in this game? Or do you say, look, we just trust Adam Thielen, or, hey, we've got the best rookie receiver in the league. I bet he can go up against a third-year Jair Alexander. What do you do?
I think that's tough, man. I think you trust Thielen, personally. Do you trust Thielen?
I trust Thielen.
In that matchup, do you trust Thielen?
He's won that matchup a couple of times. I mean, he wins way more against Kevin King. Let's not get twisted. But he's won that matchup a bunch.
He wins more against Kevin King, as one does, yeah. I don't know, man. I'm big on keep it simple, stupid, and I just think he's your best bet, and you just trust him. I trust him. I love Thielen Truther over on our podcast.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Who has the better release off the line of scrimmage? Adam Thielen or Devontae Adams?
Devontae Adams, and it's not close. And I meant
not close.
It's not close, man.
Not close. Wow. Okay. You got to talk to PFF Sam and Brad Kelly about this.
Okay, I got words with PFF, but it's meant to do on some topics. But no, actually, the first game preview that we had you on many weeks ago at this point, you sort of casually mentioned that you thought that Thielen was better, and I was in producer mode, and so I just kind of like let it slide. And then I was listening back to the show later. I was like, man, I really should have put up a fight because I do not agree with that stance.
I'm just asking about better release off the line of scrimmage. That's it.
I gotta go Adams, man. Come on.
All right. Well, I mean, we had to get the homer out of you somehow.
Yeah. Well, maybe I don't know. They're gonna do some Pro Bowl skills competitions this year in lieu of an actual game. So maybe we can come up with some release off the line measuring competition somehow.
Well, I mean, hopefully we get the punt, pass, and throw or whatever it was. Thielen is an amazing quarterback. It turns out. Yeah. Did you see that last year?
Andy Reid, also an amazing quarterback. If you've seen his punt pass.
I guess Thielen was the Pro Bowl MVP that year that they did the skills competition because he was throwing really well. He was throwing better than Mitch Trubisky, who was there for some reason. He won dodgeball for the NFC. Caught a ton of passes from Russ.
If there was ever an indictment on the Pro Bowl, because Mitch Trubisky, who was there for some reason.
We should just make the rest of this just dunk it on the 5-2 Bears.
Oh,
no,
too easy. Feels bad. No, it doesn't.
I really want to talk about that piece that I wrote last week where I was just like, the Bears are fake, and then a bunch of Bears fans got mad, and then they lost by a lot. So
Bears fans are really good at getting mad. So
yeah, that's true.
No small feat.
Okay, here's a good question. Do you feel like Patriots fans and Packers fans, as a result of being spoiled, have lost their edge when it comes to fighting in the trenches, like when it becomes like trolling on Twitter? Do you think they've lost their edge?
No, I think that there are many Packers trolls, if you will.
No, I know that there are. But I'm just like, because I got savaged by Bills fans, right? And I'm just like, I don't know that Packers fans have this in them.
Well, that's fair, but come on, the Bills, man, a passionate fan base who they've just dealt with so much crap. It is hard to compare them. I was going to say, you're comparing Packers and Patriots because, as a fan of another NFC North team, the Packers are kind of the monolith. They're the team that everyone wants to beat. And yet, I mean, as a Packers fan, like, I hate the Patriots. They've won 6 Super Bowls with Brady. 6 Super Bowl. It's not comparable. So as far as the fan bases go, I feel like it's
okay. Okay, I get that. That's fair. So Seahawks fans, right? 1 Super Bowl each. You got it. You got to take it. If you're not going to take the Patriots, the comparison's the Seahawks. 1 Super Bowl each. MVP level quarterbacks held back by their head coach in some ways. The years that they won the Super Bowl, they had an insane defense. No one really talks about the defense for the Packers. I mean, I'm not wrong about that, right? 2010, 2011, pretty good defense.
No. Yeah, absolutely.
But it so happens that there's like an elite quarterback season that beat every other quarterback season for 5 years following.
Yep.
So Seahawks fans, unusual, I will say, as a fan base, and I've had some pretty unique interactions with them, but I don't think that they have the trolling edge in the same way. Like, they troll me constantly. I don't want to like step in it, but the Bills fans were just mean. As soon as they got success, they got mean, right? And if you said the Bills were going to be bad, they found those tweets and they tried to dunk on you as hard as they could. Yeah. And I did this with Lions fans too, where and I love the Lions, right? Because it's like risk-free to love them. And I was like, when they drafted Jelani Tavai, I was just like, they got the worst coverage linebacker in the draft. And he got a pick in training camp. And I got like 80 Lions fans just in my mentions, just constantly dunking on me. It was like a pick and training camp. I don't really care, right? And they were just going hog wild. And then, of course, the season happens. He doesn't get that many snaps. It doesn't matter. I suspected if he actually played really well in coverage, I would have gotten constant attention for this. And I talked about how the Lions had MVP quality play in Matt Stafford last year. I talked about how great Kenny Golladay is. Shout out UND. I like the Lions. I think that they've got a lot of talent. They're held back by Matt Patricia. But I say one thing about the Lions that is perceived to be wrong. They get dunked on savagely. So my question then is, well, if you're a team that's like used to being good, right? Like I talked about how the Packers were fake, right? 13-3, won a bunch of close games. Ben Baldwin got a bunch of blowback from it. But I talked about how they were fake last year too. I just didn't get that much dunking from the Packers after they went 13-3.
Yeah. Maybe it's kind of like a Midwest nice thing because,
I can see that.
I got, plenty of text chains, plenty of, backroom Slack chats like we do at Acme Packing Company. And there's plenty of shit talking and biting back that goes on there, but not a lot of that makes it to air, as they say. And I think that maybe that's just it's about, you can relate to Minnesota nice, just kind of
I get it.
And we're all friends here. And I don't know, maybe there's something to that. But I echo your sentiments about the Lions because as coming from Packers fandom with a team that's beat up on the Lions a lot over the years, we had someone on our show a number of years ago to preview a Lions game, and he at some point just got so frustrated that he said, Mike, I just want to punch Mike McCarthy in the face. It was the most aggressive thing that ever been said on our show. And I was like, man, that's wild. He literally said to punch Mike McCarthy in the face.
That's incredible. Oh my God.
Which is like, it's not like trolling or a clever comeback. It's just pure anger. He was so mad at the Packers for just kind of always,
right,
having their way with
being successful. Yeah. I guess the comparison is the Cleveland Browns, because when they started winning, they didn't like really get up in anyone's mentions about that. They didn't like troll hard against anybody who was like they're bad. So I guess that's the counter example. It's just
well, they've just had it so rough for so long. And if anyone listens to like the Around the NFL podcast, there's a lifelong Browns fan on there, and I just think it's good perspective to keep in mind. But they've had it so rough for so long that it's almost like you just take the good and everything. You're just like nihilistic about everything else.
Yeah, they're just like, if this is good, I'll be happy about it. No reason for me to dunk on anybody who is wrong about Baker or whatever. Obviously, there's exceptions in every group, but like it just feels like they don't relish in dunking on cold takes or whatever.
The Packers have had success. You can relate. The Vikings have had success as far as seasons where there's a lot of winning, and as a fan, you're invested. And when they lose, you feel sour, and it ruins the rest of your day. And we've all been there. But the
Browns, that's right. Yeah, wins are a relief, right? And then losses are just normal.
At this point, the loss, after it's like 30 years, like the pain is just, they don't even feel it anymore. They don't feel it anymore. And so anything that's good is just like, that's good. I like that.
All right. So let's, I didn't even realize we're going to be talking about fandom. I just really wanted to have you guys lost your edge. I thought
this is where I excel because I'm an idiot. I don't know anything about football.
So outside of Packers rivalries, so I would throw the Seahawks in there, but also, obviously the Vikings and the Bears. Outside of those rivalries, who are the worst fans that you've ever interacted with?
The worst fans, Steelers fans.
Steelers?
Yeah, Steelers.
Because the Super Bowl back or what?
I think so. They're also like a team that's a little bit, we joke about Packers fans. We joke sometimes about ourselves. We call Titletown Entitled Town. I think there's a little bit of that in Steelers fans as well, having just like a lot of sustained success recently, but also just sort of throughout their history. Being a very successful team and not having a lot of, so many teams and the Vikings can relate, have these like huge dips and valleys. And I think that the Packers and the Steelers are similar that way. And I've just seen a lot of undies in a bunch on the internet from Steelers fans.
right, and then let's
Oh.
throw the rivalries back in. Now who's the worst?
Oh man, it's got to be the Bears. It's got to be
Yeah?
Bears fans.
You could say the
I
Vikings. No one's going to go after you on this podcast.
and
You could
maybe
say the Vikings.
so. Here's the thing though. I lived in Minneapolis for a couple years. I have a lot of friends who are Vikings fans. I still talk with them regularly. I chat with you regularly. Like I have friends across the aisle, as they say, um, and I feel like we keep it realistic. So maybe that colors my perception a little bit. But the Bears fans, first of all, Bears fans online are just ridiculous. They're just angry and mean and so wrong about so much. But also, I want to give an anecdote. I was traveling a couple years ago. My now wife and I were in Chicago, had a layover, so we wanted to get some food. We go to some sports bar downtown. I don't really know the geography there very well. And we go to a sports bar, and it happens to be while the Bears are playing. A couple years ago, I believe they were playing the Cardinals. Not sure, not relevant, but we walk in, and it's just everyone's Bears jerseys, and they're half in the tank. It's like 12 p.m. and we're sitting there, we're eating our burgers, drinking a beer, and kind of just like shoulders hunched, not wanting to give ourselves away.
Right. Yeah.
But it was like I was like as a scientist, I was curious to like watch these people.
You're an anthropology. Yeah.
Exactly. And they were so mean, and there was a player that got injured.
But not to you, right? Because you didn't like give you just like generally towards the TV.
Generally towards the TV. There was a moment in the game where an opposing player got injured, and everyone was clapping and celebrating. It's just like the polar opposite of the way that I watch football. I've kind of programmed myself at this point to anytime anyone gets hurt from any team, I just make myself go, oh, that sucks for that person, and I feel bad. And maybe it was forced a couple years ago, but now I've like reprogrammed my brain, and I do feel bad when anyone in the league gets hurt, even when it's my opponent. And yeah, Bears fans, not so much, man. These people were so mean.
Well, okay, so counterexample, when Aaron Rodgers got hurt from Anthony Barr, you saw a lot of Vikings fans take some glee in that, right?
Yes, that is true. I kind of forgot about that, actually.
You forgot about that?
Well,
Rodgers missed the season, man.
Yeah, I know. But then, it's recency bias. And the Packers smoked him the last time they played, and I'm like, that's fine. It's all fine. That's the luxury of being an entitled fan. Is like, then you goes around and next time around just pounds them, and it's like, oh, that's great. All is forgiven. But I mean, but you're not like that. Is that your experience of the typical Vikings fan?
Not typically, but I mean, I saw a lot of it.
Yeah, they're out there. That's true, man. That really chapped my cheeks. I did not like that. I mean, there was for the next year, there were Vikings fans on Twitter who you'd think that like that was their Super Bowl, the fact that they hurt another human being, and they would like post the photo and laugh and revel in it. And I don't know, man. I just like we're talking about fandom and this is all fun, but like I don't get down with that shit, man. Can I swear? That's just not
yeah.
cool.
I mean, it's
not cool.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. So then the next question is, I should end this here. It doesn't matter. The next question is, at what level does that become inappropriate, right? Because, sharing the picture and gleefully laughing, may be a problem. But a lot of people made the Aaron Rodgers walks into a bar joke. Okay, you laugh. Okay. See?
Yeah. Well, look, I'm a writer by trade. I work in marketing. That's funny. It's funny to me.
Okay. I'm glad we've got like some level where we can at least reference the event and just feel like, well, okay.
I appreciate the craft of comedy while also having a critical eye for what should technically be funny and joked about. I think it's a fine line, but I laughed. I don't know. I'm just like a dad joke that would happen.
All right, so back to football real quick. We didn't talk about special teams. Tyler Ervin, great returner. We won't talk about him because that's a little bit less interesting. Is Mason Crosby going to play? If he doesn't, what happens at kicker?
So they are bringing in a just-in-case kicker who shows you how much I know. I actually don't have their name in front of me. But in terms of kickoffs, J.K. Scott is their punter is a very capable kickoff specialist as well. Honestly, he's probably got a more powerful leg in that way than Mason Crosby does. But yeah, if he can't go, then they will elevate I believe is a rookie kicker to handle field goal duty. I'm just really knocking on wood that the Silver Fox, as I joke in my household, I call him, can go.
Do you think if he can't go, they've got that rookie kicker? Do you think they just go for 2 a bunch, presuming that they score?
I wouldn't put it past him. I feel like, Matt LaFleur was aggressive last year. He's been even more aggressive this year going forward on 4th down. I think that's kind of the trend in the NFL. So I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't put it past him. I would might clench my butt cheeks a little bit at the thought, but sure, why not? Go for 2 every time. Let's do it.
All right, J.K. Scott, top 5 punter or top 10 punter?
Ooh, I don't know enough about the punting game to tell you.
I'm going to need you to know about this.
He's no hecker, but I'm going to say top 5. I don't know. Or if he's not top 5 now, he will be soon. And if anything, he's underrepresented because the Packers offense has been good enough to keep him from putting a lot of tape out there, as they say.
He doesn't have the reps. Yeah.
But looks like a 12-year-old boy can really boom the effing ball, man. And his placement has been really good this year. I think he's top 5. There. How about that? Definitive statement. Top 5.
Sure. Top 5. All right. So we got Johnny Hecker, probably Jack Fox, right? The Colts punter, maybe, was his name. Roberto Sanchez. And then, some people, maybe J.K. Scott. Top 5. There you go.
Honorary, put Marquette King in there, even though he's been blackballed.
Oh, and Brett Kern, actually.
Oh, yeah.
So let's take a look at PFF punting grades, see where you ended up. Number 6. That's good enough. I'll give that to you.
A podcast is going great when the host says, let's take a look at PFF punter grades real quick.
This is great stuff. All right. Well, that's everything. Thanks so much, dude, for coming on and putting up with my ridiculous. I usually don't ask questions like this.
Well, I gave you thank you for having me. I gave you the preface in our DM that I am an idiot. Thank you for letting me crap all over your show.
This is entertaining. This is good, man.
Thanks, man.
All right. Yeah. So this was Zach Rapport. You can find him over at Acme Packing Company. You only do podcasts there?
Very, very occasionally we'll do the write-up. I do some game picks as well, but yeah, the podcast is my jam, the APC podcast.
Cool. Is there anything else you want to plug?
Anything else I want to plug? Go vote and wear a mask.
All right. You heard the man. Go vote, wear a mask. Both at the same time, I think.
Yes.
All right, cool.
All right, let's go to the mailbag. And the first question is from Nolan Kaler, who asks, Cress, question for Arif's sellout corner. Why blame Danny Kelly for something that is so clearly your true feelings come to light on a national platform? Also, Corey Rug says that Arif was great on Mina Kimes' podcast. When is Norse Code fully committing to the tank and turning into a food podcast? Or are we still thinking Norse Code can win out and get those playoff subscribers?
I am pretty curious what we're going to be doing during the playoffs. I'm always curious what we do, and then we figure out content anyway. But
that is.
Turns out the Vikings have not made the playoffs every year of Norse Code's existence. Believe it or not.
No, as it I turn into Michelle from Just a Dash.
Yeah. Big cleanup.
Yep, there's definitely a big cleanup in the off season.
Yeah, but okay. So first of all, it is definitely Danny Kelly's fault that I get accused of being a Seahawks fan. I've never been a Seahawks fan. In 2013, I thought they had a pretty good secondary, which I thought was a fairly common belief that a lot of people have. But okay, people are using my 2013 tweets against me now. No, he asked me to write a couple of articles about former Vikings joining the Seahawks, which, if you remember at the time, was like a plentiful occurrence, right? So I ended up writing about Percy Harvin and Kevin Williams and a couple of other players. And for some reason, people are like, "Oh, it's a Seahawks, the Seahawks fan," and it is. I'm going to set the record straight as often as possible on a national platform because they called me out on like around the NFL podcast, like for being a Seahawks fan, and I'm not even on that podcast to defend myself. What can I do about this?
This is just, the worst part of cancel culture, isn't it?
That's why I signed on to the Harper's letter.
Jeez.
So that's what I have to say about that.
Lacking the words.
I appreciate the kind words about me being on the Lenny show featuring Mina Kimes. That was fun. I was able to talk about other teams, which is nice too. And it's proof that I watched the games, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, we had a lot of nice notes in for Arif's appearance over there. I did end up listening as well, and it was obviously the two of you were familiar with each other and everything, but it was nice to it's always nice whenever you get some actual national exposure on that sort of thing. Plus, anyone who has been around Lebitard's father as much as she has, that
right,
that cool just that he obviously has just wears off on people. So
yeah, that's certainly she's benefited from that.
As a total side note of people appearing on other people's podcasts this week, in addition to Arif being on the on Mina Kimes' show, if you wanted evidence that Dusty was not dead in a basement, if you go to the Best Served podcast, which for whatever reason the video version of this is available on Facebook, but I can't seem to find it anywhere else. There is an episode of the Best Served podcast, not the newest one, but I believe the second one or something like that. Dusty, of all people, is set up. It's the Best Served podcast, and it's Best Served Tableside Volume 1, Leaving the Industry, where Dusty is talking about his new business and everything. So if you are interested in such a thing and want video evidence that he at least has a window where he is being stored.
Yeah, Dusty is definitely alive,
yep.
And we did not Weekend at Bernie's him with a talented ventriloquist, and I resent the accusation, honestly.
Yeah, that I realize it's an oddly specific thing to deny, but here we are. Not a case.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes in case anyone's missing.
Anyone's missing
I can't
Dusty.
talk today, man. If anyone's missing Dusty, based off of some passive aggressive comments I occasionally see when people are recommending Vikings podcasts, some of you are missing Dusty. So
it's okay. It's okay. I've read the iTunes reviews too, so it's it's fine. Swerve and Shervin.
Reminder: words hurt people.
Says the person whose goal every year is to get into more arguments on Twitter. Just remember, people, words hurt.
I don't make them personal.
Oh, okay. That's okay. I was reading something today about I forget which former Democratic nominee had a microphone and somebody was shouting him down, and it was just evidence that you don't go after the guy with a microphone. It's just
the classic stand-up rule.
Yeah. You just don't do it. Heckling doesn't. It's a poor choice because they have the microphone. So it's that sort of situation. Swerve and Shervin asks, would Cousins make the Rams better or at least more fun? Good God, Rams games are boring.
Yeah, they are, and I think that he would make them more fun. I don't know about better, but certainly, he takes more chances than Jared Goff. Last year, that worked out pretty well for him and the Vikings. This year, not as much, but certainly a lot more fun. Plus, the benefit of Rams games is that if they turn the ball over, which, they're a little bit too cautious to, Aaron Donald gets to be on the field. And so you get to have a lot of fun watching Aaron Donald do Aaron Donald stuff, like stopping the run. And Cousins has certainly given the Vikings ample opportunity to feature their defense. They, haven't done a ton with that opportunity, but the Rams can. So, that amazing Jalen Ramsey pick from the other day, last weekend, I think that's pretty good evidence that it's sometimes fun to have the defense on the field. As for whether or not they'll make the Rams better, maybe. I kind of doubt it. I mean, obviously Cousins would be a different player in that system, and maybe he doesn't throw as many picks, but I feel like the picks he's throwing, this year are pretty much his fault. So hard to say that he would make them better, but certainly he'd make them more exciting.
What about Jared Goff on the Vikings? Would they make them? Would he make them better or more interesting?
It wouldn't make them more interesting. He might make them, but it's tough because the thing about Jared Goff, like the joke about him, is that he's just like the Madden avatar of Sean McVay. So you don't actually know like how great he is at some of this stuff. But presuming that he is as good as he appears to be, he'd probably make them better this year, but he probably would have made them worse last year. Which I would imagine probably means that going forward, the likelihood is that he would not necessarily make them a ton better. Plus, the Vikings are a team that needs, just because of how bad they are, especially on defense, they are a team that needs somebody that is going to take some chances in order to dig them out of holes. So that's an interesting situation where Cousins might make the Vikings better as well, which is just a very weird thing to think because I don't think many people think Cousins is a better quarterback than Goff. But I think you take a look at the two situations of the two teams, and you can kind of see an argument for why Cousins makes them better. But, if you build a franchise from the ground up and you're convinced that this franchise can compete, you maybe do want Jared Goff, just because he's going to increase your average wins a little bit more. I don't know. That's interesting.
Is Jared Goff a much less elite version of Joe Flacco?
Not really, because Flacco used to throw it deep, at least earlier in his career, and he had this giant arm. But yeah, the thing about them both being statues, that's pretty relevant and accurate. Both in terms of they just don't have athleticism, and also because they can't. Neither of them can manage a pocket very well. There's a comparison there. And there's not many statue quarterbacks to compare people to, so it's probably a closer comparison. But I think that because Flacco used to rip it deep, that it doesn't quite work out.
There's this YouTube video of Jared Goff attempting to have a personality, sneaking onto a it's a horrible thing to say, sorry. Pretending to have a personality, sneaking onto a college campus and pretending to be this pretending to be this quarterback that was just brought in from outside, and he's
that was actually great.
Yeah, he's competing for the quarterback job, and he's just bombing. He's just sending bombs out to all of these receivers who've never seen anything like this. And my favorite part is when he takes off the fake like nose or whatever and the fake hair, and people recognize him as Jared Goff. Meanwhile, I cover this stuff and I couldn't pick him out of a lineup. I know what Nick Foles looks like. So if you put him next to Nick Foles, I know which one's Nick Foles. But Jared Goff, I close my eyes, I still can't picture his face. So like all of these college kids immediately knowing who Jared, like saying aloud, "Oh my God, it's Jared Goff!" Like, really?
Well, I mean, there's the possibility that they just redid that shot.
Oh well, yeah, duh. That's
I'll say that too.
Let me be perfectly clear. There's a real good possibility that's exactly what happened.
Because there's also a non-zero possibility that like he took off the prosthetic nose and all that, and they're like, "Wait, Ryan Gosling can sling it?"
Yeah, like, I'm confused. You're a less handsome version of Jimmy Garoppolo. Who are you? Like, oh my God, you're Trevor Lawrence. 4 years before Trevor Lawrence became a thing. It's
right. Trevor Lawrence with a haircut. What are you doing here, man?
I don't understand this at all. Kenneth Allen asks a version of the question that he asked for the Seattle game, which is, will this be the game, or will this game be the one that people point to at the end of the season as definite evidence that Rodgers was the 2020 MVP?
So I said no last time when it was about Wilson, and I was kind of wrong about that because Wilson pulls off this like remarkable fourth quarter comeback in a tight game, despite playing poorly all game, relatively speaking. People love pointing to comebacks as why you would win an MVP. So you either have to play lights out for the whole game and do like a 10 yards per attempt, 400 yards, 5 touchdowns sort of thing, or you have to have a comeback to dig yourself out of, which I think was a big part of the argument for Andrew Luck, who early in his career, caused a lot of problems, threw a lot of picks. I thought he was overrated early in his career because of this, but he ended up having a lot of come from behind victories where he came from behind from the problems that he caused. And a lot of people were really attached to that. And so he won, I think, Rookie of the Year, even though, Wilson was more efficient and Griffin was better. Although actually maybe Griffin did win Rookie of the Year, but there was a lot of steam for Andrew Luck, even though he was like the third best quarterback that year. So that is a possibility that a comeback does that. I think that this time Rodgers does it the other way around, where he just dominates 10 yards per attempt or whatever. Again, I have to be a little bit cautious because it's difficult to point to a game against a bad team as the reason you'd be the MVP. Russ does get that because of the come from behind victory. But that at least did occur on national television. I'm pretty sure this Packers game it's not national, right? It's a 4 p.m. game. I don't know. I gotta look this up.
No, it's the noon game.
Okay, yeah. So he's probably not going to get anything out of this game for his MVP race except statistics that'll later impact the end of year evaluation.
Yeah. Next question is from Chris, who asks, is there a single reason for the Packers to ever rush more than 4 in this game?
I think confusing the read is useful. I think like the point of blitzing is not just to create pressure, although obviously that's the primary goal. I think also confusing the read for Cousins, who clearly can lose out when he doesn't, read the defense appropriately. So if you rush more than 4 and you've got a zone behind it, that is going to be sometimes confusing for quarterbacks. Or you rush 5, but you drop a defensive lineman and he accidentally throws into that pressure. That creates a turnover, and that's more valuable than the pressure. So there is a reason, but yeah, I can't imagine the Packers will be too aggressive about blitzing if they can just get pressure with 4, which, I mean, you heard the interview. Seems pretty likely to me.
Yeah. Nick asks, heard the Ravens inquiring about what it would cost to acquire Adam Thielen and Irv Smith. Could you speculate on what you would want in return if you were the GM? We covered Adam Thielen last episode, but we didn't really cover Irv Smith. Are you thinking that'd be like a 5th, or what would you think?
Irv Smith? No. You wouldn't be a 5th. I wouldn't be surprised if he was a 2nd, which is where he was drafted, but I could see a 3rd just because he hasn't popped off in a big way. But because he's so young, I would expect a 2nd for him. And just to address I don't know if this rumor has any validity to it. I just want to put that out there. I do know that a lot of teams are calling the Vikings. I can put that out there. But that doesn't mean anything, right? The teams are calling the Vikings to see who is available. Tweet that out, guys. That's not interesting news. But I don't know if the Ravens are one of the teams or who they're necessarily asking about. So I can't confirm that or affirm the validity of that rumor.
Yeah, there's been...
It would make sense if the Ravens grabbed Adam Thielen, though, because as you might have heard from my appearance on the Media Comments podcast, they could really use a reliable receiver to provide a floor for passing production because they're a very big play dependent offense and they just haven't been generating big plays. And Justin Herbert's a very big play dependent quarterback, but he has that floor with Keenan Allen. So he's got the ability to kind of build off of that when the big play isn't there. And the Ravens could really use that with Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, there's been a number of teams that have been rumored to have been talking to the Vikings, including a team that you would expect to do that, which would be the Browns. So there's been rumors, but nothing seems to have been substantial enough to do anything. But this is what happens around the trade deadline for teams that are terrible. So this is kind of where we're at.
Yep.
Abdel Naderhive asks, if the Vikings starting offense were to play a game of Among Us, who do you think would get voted out first? You have expert abilities as far as Among Us is concerned, apparently.
Yeah, I played Among Us with Luke Braun and Ole Udo and a couple of other people the night before this recording, actually. That was pretty fun. I mean, except the imposter kept killing Ole Udo right away every time. That was a bit much. But yeah, who would give? That would have been a good question to ask him. I don't know if he would have answered, but my guess is Cousins. That seems right to me. One of the things about Among Us is that you either have to lie convincingly or tell the truth convincingly, which are two different skills. But I am not confident that Cousins has either of them. And so if someone accuses Cousins of being the imposter, like what's he gonna like? It doesn't seem like he'd be able to put together a great enough answer to be able to get out of that. So that's my guess. Um, yeah, there's and also for people unfamiliar with Among Us, it's a game where it's a very simple like flash based game where there's like 10 of you or 8 of you or some number, but we usually try to get up to 10. And 2 of you are imposters and 8 of you are crewmates, and the goal is to finish every task in a certain amount of time. The imposters have 2 ways to hold you back. They can either kill you, or they can sabotage the ship, and if you don't fix the sabotage in enough time, you lose. There's like a kill timer and all that. There's a bunch of mechanic stuff, but every time a body is found, you get to call a meeting and to kind of determine who the imposter is and vote them out. And it's fun. It's a ton of fun. But yeah, this does not seem like a game that Cousins is very well built for.
See, I wonder how Jared Goff would do. I'm just saying.
Just saying, would he be better, or would he be at least more fun?
would
I actually don't know the answer to either of those.
He might make the game more interesting. Who knows? William says, settle a bet with a friend. When the Cowboys and Vikings play, who will find a way to lose the game first? Naturally, I said the Vikings because we've had more practice in the area over the years. He says the Cowboys because everything is bigger in Texas, even their ability to choke. I want to point out that this game is happening in Minnesota. So I'm willing to bet that the lack of home field advantage for the Cowboys and their ability to choke may be on the line here. It may not be a factor.
Yeah, I can't imagine that the choking factor breaks in the Cowboys' way. I think one, obviously, you can point to the history. I think that's a pretty strong argument. But I think two, just take a look. I mean, the Cowboys got one of the iconic comeback from behind victories this year against the Falcons, obviously, but they still got it. And
it's more than you can say for the Vikings this year against the Falcons. Yeah. Yes,
right. The Vikings had the same opportunity against the Falcons, and they blew it. They have had, I believe, no come from behind wins because they only have the one win, and it was not a come from behind. And they've lost a couple of leads this year. And maybe just the one.
And let's look at the quarterback for the Cowboys.
Yeah, right. They've got Ben DiNucci, James Madison, superstar, all-star quarterback, All-American, unanimous, I think, All-American, FCS. Just a remarkable player that figured out how to avoid getting drafted so he could pick his team, which is very difficult because his college film was so extraordinary. But he did manage to do it.
Smart move.
Another reason, yeah. And he probably knew that the situation with Dak was a little bit precarious. So that's probably why he chose the Cowboys, which, again, smart move. Ended up turning out for him after Andy Dalton bombed out, which he knew was going to happen because he's also got an eye for talent. Yeah, I mean, the Nooch is extraordinarily clutch. The only issue, of course, is the national championship game against NDSU, which, of course, I contend they were cheating, so it's kind of difficult to hold that one against him. The last time we saw a Pitt transfer head into the FCS and enter the NFL, that guy won a Super Bowl. You might have heard of him. His name is Joe Flacco. So I don't see how you can pick against the Cowboys in that game, which would mean that the Vikings would choke it. So yeah, I mean, there's that. I think also just the fact that the Vikings, they had a lead against Seattle. They had a lead against. Did they ever have a lead against Atlanta?
No,
I don't remember. Oh no, they didn't. But they had a couple of clutch situations pop up over this year. Haven't executed on them. Had a bunch of clutch situations last year, and despite making the playoffs, I don't think they executed on any of them except the Broncos. And they lost out in all their other clutch situations. So they've got a long history of failure with that. They've got Kirk Cousins. The Cowboys have DiNucci. This is like a slam dunk. Like your Cowboys fan might be sad because the Cowboys are bad, but he's just kind of living in his own experience. He doesn't realize what it's like for all these other teams that sometimes have choke artists just kind of perform for them professionally every week.
Yeah. You don't bet. You should not bet against the Nooch. Mike asks, any tips? Oh, this is for Arif's family corner. Mike, any tips on getting through this COVID winter with a house full of family who routinely answers my questions with more questions? I just tell people to leave. I just I just send them away.
Yeah, you just can't put up with that. you just gotta, like, if they do that, you just gotta this is a very Minnesotan response. Just like respond with your own aggravating tics until they fix theirs. Like,
you answer their questions with more passive aggression. That is what what this winter needs. If you're all locked in and everyone's, getting slightly more and more agitated, is to bring more passive aggression into the mix.
Yeah. Have they screwed up a recipe recently? Do it better than them and don't bring it up. Just,
my, that's dude. That could get somebody in some trouble. I fully endorse it, but that could get somebody into some real deep trouble.
I'm just saying, if they're not respecting the social contract involved in living with someone and asking them a basic question, they've already broken the contract, man. Go all out.
I realize this is a Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, like Midwest like a podcast, whatever, and the winter may not allow this, but you may need to start going on some walks there, Chief. I think we're going to see a lot of walkers this winter as people slowly but surely are driven insane by their families far quicker than normal in the winter. Tommy Gunn says, I want to know how Arif is. I mean, how Arif truly is doing. No less than 500 words.
No less than. No, we can't have a podcast run that long. No, I mean, I'm doing all right. This basement office is kind of whatever. I'd like to go out and do stuff, but I can't. And I've got a really stressful writing schedule. So I guess I'm writing a 3,000 word response on game day to put out Monday morning. And then I've got the 5,000 word. It's actually 6,000. It's supposed to be 5,000. 6,000 word player of the week column. And then I got another 2 columns every week. And then I do these podcasts. So a lot of work to do, man. But I mean, I don't know. I like watching football. It's pretty fun to have as a job.
There. Are you sufficiently is that a sufficient enough answer, Tommy Gunn? Good.
I'd hope so. It's probably less than 500 words, but I think you can.
It's close enough.
With it.
Dusty asks, "Is a ghost a monster?"
I think so.
I think sludge is a monster.
Sludge is definitely a monster.
Sludge from the Christmas or from the Halloween thing of Maddie Matt. Yeah, I think Sludge is in fact a monster and is coming for us all.
I'm gonna look. I'm gonna Google "Are Ghost Monsters" and see kind of what the. Well, so first, Ghost appears on the Monster Wiki, which is it just a fandom of monsters in general, or is it an IP named monster? No, it's about just monsters in general. So it's on the wiki. Seems like it's a monster. I just is the only difference between a ghost and a zombie that the ghost maintains some memories and they're not corporeal?
Yeah, I think it's the ethereal nature of hey, there's your SAT word of the day. I think it's the ethereal nature of the ghost versus the physical being of the zombie or of the the carbon-based life form.
Right. The carbon-based life form. But yeah, I mean, zombies are unquestionably monsters, right? So you'd have to make an argument that the ethereality of the ghost makes it not a monster, which that doesn't make sense to me. I don't know why that would be the case.
No.
And ghosts are typically like antagonistic. So it's not even the fact that they may retain memories of their previous life, I don't think prevents them from being monsters either.
No, you look at a situation like Poltergeist, the ghost was definitely could be considered the monster in the movie. Unless you're just asking like if they're monsters in general. If your ghost job is to be a monster, for example.
Oh, yeah, maybe. The only I guess the only argument against it is just when you say the word monster, and you ask 100 people to describe a monster, they would never probably describe a ghost. But I think for the most part, ghosts are monsters.
Well, I mean, when you look at movies where like ghosts are are prevalent, you know, there are movies out there where the ghosts scare someone to death. Like that's a thing that they do. So they get a heart attack because they've been scared. They've been properly terrified. So it's not like a quick death or anything. It's not the Texas Chainsaw Massacre guy walking around Leatherface with a with a chainsaw or anything. But I still think it counts as a monster.
Yeah. So yeah, we're in agreement here.
It's the ethereal nature of it all. Don from Ohio asks, over under 1.5 trades by the Vikings before the trade deadline.
I always love these over under questions. Let me take so first of all, I accidentally closed out of the show notes when I was looking up ghosts.
That's actually a really fun sentence there.
I'd say yeah. I'd say actually I might take the under. I think it's just one trade. I think people want you to trade, and we're not counting Gagakui obviously. So I think people want Riley Reef traded. I think they want Kyle Rudolph traded. I think there's questions about Adam Thielen, Hurston Smith we talked about. I don't think Irv Smith's on the trading block. I think you build around players like him. So I think they want those 4 players to be traded. And if you really stretch, and I don't think you should, but if you really stretch, you get Eric Hendricks. So that's 4, possibly 5 players that you would trade, and you're probably not getting rid of, generally speaking, you're only trading 1 player, not 2. So you probably only end up losing one of these players. But I don't think that it's very easy to generate trades in the NFL. So I'm going to go with 1, but be interesting if there's more than 1.
I don't think they end up trading any of them. This isn't something the Vikings do on a regular basis, as we covered last episode. So I think that ends up being a situation where they don't end up doing any moves until the end of the season, like until the things open up again. But I think this ends up being one of those situations where it makes sense to do it, and as a result, that's why it doesn't happen. And it just sits and frustrates all the writers and everybody who ends up spilling a bunch of ink over ideas on it. Like, really, this would be a really good idea. This would be a good way to reset it. Rick Spielman reads like, nah, that's not how we do things around here.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm not going to tell you about how much better the food I just made as opposed to the food you made 2 weeks ago that was crap. Like it's like a level of passive aggression here.
Well, you don't got to make the direct comparison. You're just like, oh wow, this really turned out this time. Huh?
This time, yeah. As long as you say this time,
it's the closest you get. Yeah, that's the closest you get.
Oh, God, that's so bad. That's how you get murder suicided. Don from Ohio also asks the final question of the episode, which is: we watched the movie Lake Mungo mostly due to its Rotten Tomato score, which was 95%. It was one of the most boring and stupidest movies we've ever seen. Outside of the last several Star Wars movies, which is a very fun sentence, what is a movie that you watched that had a very high Rotten Tomato score but was awful? And the first movie that comes to mind is a movie that was right at the very top of the list when we ended up Googling this, which was Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, which I thought was an abomination.
Yeah, terrible movie. It was almost the second movie I've ever walked out of in the theater. The first being Kicking and Screaming with Will Ferrell.
Wow.
Of all things.
That's what was the movie I walked out of? I walked out of 2. I walked out of the third Batman. Was it the third or the fourth? It was the Batman movie that had Arnold Schwarzenegger in it.
Oh, what you also talked about? Come on, man! It's got amazing writing. Ice to me too. Come on.
I remember walking out of that, and I
can't believe it. Iconic movie.
Oh yeah, sure. I can't remember if I was with a friend or not. We lived close enough to the theater where I could just ride my bike and go into the movie and everything. So I don't remember if I went with a friend or if I went alone. I just remember leaving like, I'm not even a teenager and my intelligence is insulted.
My taste is better than this.
I am better. I am better than this moment. I need to be better. I think the other one was it was a Bill Murray movie. It was The Man Who Knew Too Little, like the remake that had Bill Murray in it. And I just
Oh
went,
wow.
I can't do this. And I ended up just up and leaving. I was like, I can't, no.
So like what made you what moment did you walk out of? I think that one's Batman and Robin. What moment did you walk out? Was it like tonight's forecast? A freeze is coming.
I don't. I think I made it until right before, because I've had to watch. I say I've had to watch it since it's been on TV since, and I have caught the rest of the movie since then. And I also watched it in riff. I think I first made it through the whole way, thanks to riff tracks. So I was able to make it
best served cold.
Yes, thank you. God, what a terrible movie. So I made it through thanks to riff tracks. Thankfully my brain has decided as I've gotten older to stop caring about certain things. So, which so my memory isn't as great as it used to be on these things. It's starting to affect my personal life now, because I'm starting to realize I don't remember things anymore, which is kind of troubling. But this particular movie, it was right before the final battle scene.
Oh wow.
I made it to that point and something happened right before the final battle where I just
and you're like, okay, all right.
Kramer scene from the Bet episode of Seinfeld where I slammed down the money like, I'm out. And I can't remember if this was opening weekend or not, but there were a lot of people in the theater. And I remember just getting up and leaving. Like, I can't, whatever this is, I don't want to be a part of it. I'm not going to finish this. I'm not going to finish this journey with you.
I will say this. So back to Indiana Jones Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So I was watching that to reconnect with an ex, which unfortunately it worked. And so we decided to stick to the movie because I think we both had basically the same goal in mind. And it wouldn't have been as fun if we like left the movie early. So we decided to just kind of watch it because it was so bad, and you could laugh at it like when he because that movie begins with him like hiding in a fridge to escape a nuclear blast.
Yep,
right?
He hides in a fridge. It blows him sky high. He lands like it's like nothing ever happened.
Right, but like the people that were in the car that he was trying to get into get like roasted alive. Right. Okay. Totally. So we decided, like, when it's so bad it's good, we were going to laugh through the movie. And I did not realize the number of people in the theater that were trying to enjoy the movie genuinely. And I mean, that was a long time ago. I probably would have been a little bit more conscientious just of other people. But I probably ruined that movie for a lot of people too by laughing the whole time. But Jesus, that movie is so bad. It's so like I can't. It doesn't make any sense. The plot doesn't work. I'm a Shia LaBeouf stan, right? Like he's hilarious. Like he makes some interesting movies. Sometimes he's genuinely good. Sometimes he's just bad, but in a great way. And I couldn't with this movie. Why is he even in the movie? He's just not a fit for the kind of movie Indiana Jones is. Yeah, God, the movie doesn't make, and all the callbacks to previous Indiana Jones movies, unnecessary, forced, awkward, no chemistry. Just a terrible movie. I was surprised it got a fresh score. It was 77%. And that's probably a good thing to bring up with the Rotten Tomatoes score. So I generally agree with the critic score. Actually, I agree with it more often than the audience score. But one thing to keep in mind is that all the score does is tell you how many people liked it, not how much they liked it. So I think with this movie, or at least one other movie on the list, it might be a case where a bunch of people were like, yeah, it's worth the money to go, but they weren't like enthusiastic about it. But a bunch of people had the same opinion. And so that's the one thing about ranking movies by like their Rotten Tomatoes ranking, is that if everybody likes a movie, it's probably not the best movie, because I think movies probably have to take some risks to be good, and you're going to have to, piss off some people, or at least make people not like it, in order for it to be something that a lot of people can really attach themselves to. So I'll say that. But I still don't know how 70%, 77% of reviewers who watched the movie were like, yeah, take your family. Everybody can watch it. No, dude.
No, as it turns out, it should be used as torture in certain situations. Like, it's just bad.
Yeah.
Speaking of movies that didn't take any chances and all of that, another one from the list that we pulled up was About a Boy, which was something I was thinking about because at the time that I ended up watching it, I had just was a big fan of High Fidelity. Uh, I really enjoyed the book as well, Nick Hornsby. I enjoyed the book for About a Boy, but not as much. And then I watched the movie for About a Boy, and it was atrocious and incredibly boring. I don't know how. Actually, I do know how I made it through the movie. I remember watching it with my then girlfriend, and she really wanted to see it because Hugh Grant was in it. So leaving wasn't an option because he was still in it. They hadn't killed him off or anything. That would have made the movie a million times more interesting, despite the fact that it doesn't happen in the book.
Well, if they kill him off and it doesn't happen in the book, now you can't, predict what's going to happen next. Now they got to change everything.
Exactly. Now all bets are off. Now we're at Evil Dead 2 level. Like, I don't know what's going to happen now.
I think it was executive decision starring Steven Seagal that killed Seagal off like 10 minutes into the movie. Amazing decision. I don't remember like how good the rest of the movie was. I just decided I immediately loved it because it's just like you marketed with. He's on the poster. Every single line of dialogue he has in this movie basically made it into trailers or commercials. Like he was a selling point of the movie, and he just dies. He never comes back either. It's just he's like definitively he dies. Spoilers for executive decision.
Spoilers for a 20, 30-year-old movie.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's old. Yeah, but yeah, it's just like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm for this. I'm here with this. Which they like the whole plot of the movie was they took so there's like the people hijack a plane. The president's on it. Must be Air Force One. It's the one that's not the one where Harrison Ford kills all the terrorists.
Get off my plane.
It's an incredible movie. And so they put together a crack special ops team led by Steven Seagal, and they need to board the plane from midair. And they decide that because the plane has radar, they need a stealth plane. And at the time, the only stealth plane was like the B-17 that's like notoriously difficult to fly and like barely flies at all. And they needed it to fly parallel to like the Boeing that was Air Force One. And I remember at the time I was like 8, 9, I don't know. I remember watching and I was like, wait, that sounds dumb. That sounds really impossible. Like, what are the terrorists going to do if they find out that there's a plane nearby? Like, you just have a plane that works. This is ridiculous. But yeah, they end up connecting to the plane and going through the bottom, probably through one of the wheel wells. And it just like Steven Seagal is the last one to go up, and it just snaps in half. And he just like without a word, right? There's not like a moment where you're like, get in, it's about to blow. No, it just snaps and he just dies. And he just flies off the screen. It's incredible.
For a second, I was confusing the plot of that with the movie Broken Arrow. And
that another great Steven Seagal.
It's like for some reason I was thinking that was Broken Arrow, and then the more I was like, nope, that definitely didn't happen in Broken Arrow. I actually just had to watch Armageddon yesterday because I'd never seen it.
You've never seen Armageddon? Oh man, so you got treated to like the Liv Tyler, Steven Tyler. That song was so popular too.
That was why I was a teenager in the late 90s. I avoided it like the plague. The song made it so I didn't want to watch the movie. And it had, it was funny.
That song got played a lot.
It did. And as somebody who ended up DJing weddings and events shortly after that, there's my reason for never doing it. And any dance I did after 2001, I did dances from 2000 from right January 2000 until August of 2017, I want to say. And I only played it upon request, and I only played it really the first 2 or 3 years I was starting, just because I it finally died. Like, there was no reason to do it after that. But that song and how popular it was, because it never went away. It was really popular for like 2 years after that.
Yeah,
Even school
that song was
dances.
yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
so
Which the video song has like Liv Tyler in a strip club, which is just very weird because it's like it's your daughter, dude. Like you shot a video where your daughter was stripping? That's so bizarre.
No, the whole thing is, and she's just, bless her heart, she's just so terrible in the movie. Like, it's just, I don't know if you've watched it in 20 years, but I can tell you that she is atrocious in the movie, and she is so much better in everything she's in now. But 25 years ago, she was so terrible at this in this movie, and emoting and trying to, and just, it was so difficult every time she came on the screen. But I was forced to watch it yesterday because we were talking and it was revealed I had never seen it, and she thought I was joking. She was convinced that was just, something you say, like, oh no, yeah, I never did that, when I clearly had. It's like, no, I purposefully avoided it. I made it 37 years in this life without seeing Armageddon, and then I sat down and watched it, and it was so dumb I wanted to turn it off last night when they were drilling in and a gun was brought out for some reason, and like, what do you have a gun out in space for, I think was one of the lines. Like,
what do you have a gun out in space for?
And if you haven't watched Armageddon in the last 25 years, do yourself a favor and watch that for 2.5 hours at some point in the next couple of weeks. Because everything that happens in the movie became a trope afterwards, became something you pointed to afterwards. So you're watching the birth of all of these terrible things, all of the, the Michael Bay blows up everything sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And oh God, I even said to her at some point, is like, I want to turn this off. I want to go to bed, but I'm too emotionally involved now because I know how this is going to end, but I have to just sit and I have to finish this. I have to just sit down and I have to grin and bear it. I have to make it until the credits roll and that stupid wedding scene happens. Like, I have to just,
I remember, I remember watching Mystery Men, which I think came out like a year later. And it cameoed Michael Bay, and they just they made fun of Armageddon a lot, which again, it only came out 1 year later. So it was in production. It was probably in post-production. So they must have added stuff afterwards. So Mystery Men is not, I'll remember it forever because it's just one of those things that you watch as a young kid and it just imprints on you for whatever reason. It probably didn't age well. The jokes probably don't stand up.
It hasn't, and they don't.
Okay, great. Yeah. But they do just relentlessly seem to make fun of some of the tropes that Armageddon created, again, only a year later. So, which was just weird to me because at the time I just watched Armageddon and I was like, are they, because I was just getting into being old enough to watch movies to think about them. I was like, wait, are they just making fun of Armageddon? Because they've got William H. Macy plays a quarry worker who turns into a superhero and his weapon is a shovel. It's a whole thing. Michael Bay's in it. It's a whole thing. It's incredible. Anyway, don't watch it.
But do watch Armageddon just for, God, just find a way not to pay for it. Just don't give him any money for this.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Man, now I'm looking at the cast of Mystery Men was enormous and they didn't make any money. It was that bad.
I enjoyed the movie, but that's kind of beside the point.
I loved it at the time, but I don't think it stands up. And I think the premise is fine. It probably would overwhelm the market now with just there's so many superhero movies, and so a parody of superhero movies, which there are already a bunch of funny ones. Probably doesn't do much, but originally, I mean, the whole thing is they've got a superhero group, and they're all, you can't even tell for a while if they actually have superpowers, and it's kind of left until later when the powers are revealed to be real for half of them, not the other half. But one of them, I think Janine Garofalo, is a bowler, and her thing is that she's got a bowling ball that contains the skull and I believe soul of her dead father. who's also a bowler. Hank Azaria is in it, and he plays a probably racist depiction of a person who throws cutlery but not knives with a lot of accuracy. It is like there's a guy who can turn invisible, but only if nobody's looking. Which that right? It's got Eddie Izzard in it. Like there's like a whole thing. It should have been good. It just wasn't.
So that is going to be it for now that we did a deep dive.
So there you go.
Sweet. So your two answers are Crystal Skull, Indiana Jones the Crystal Skull, and About a Boy, and then everything else on that list, including the remake of King Kong, which was interesting.
Oh yeah, I can't believe that was fresh either.
Yeah. So that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Arif, where can they find your work?
theathletic.com/author/Arif-Hassan. Just had a mailbag up. Obviously I took in a bunch of reader questions, answered them about, things like trades and whether or not it makes sense to play the backup lineman more often than not now, what the Vikings goals might be kind of going forward, whether or not, when they traded for Ngakoue, they expected Daniel Hunter back, all that. Plus I've got a piece coming up about specifically trading Harrison Smith, Adam Thielen, and what the pros and cons of those are.
All right, so that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. For Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening, and please remember to always bring your wine towel. And we will be back next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code, LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's official Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. You can also find his written work at theathletic.com. I am your podcast host and producer, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or you can make a recurring monthly contribution by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. A donation of $3.50 per month does get you bonus material from the show and much more. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.